everyone. I am Billy Dees, and welcome to the podcast. We have been doing these interviews with people on Twitter, and it's not just about Twitter. Even if you are not a Twitter user, that isn't the point. We really want to, let's say, get behind the person, get behind the account to who the person is, talk to them about what they are passionate about, what they like to create, and so on and so forth. And on the studio line with me today, I have Janae Giddens. How are you doing?
I'm great, Billy. How are you?
I'm doing real good. Let me try your name one more time. Janae Giddens. There you go.
That's
For
it.
some reason, I got hung up on it there.
You're not the only one.
Oh, okay. You are a pretty talented person, and I'm just going to give a brief thing, and we're going to talk about all these things. You are the creator of Tune Talks, and we're going to talk about the history of that. You also like to write music, and you have these recorded interviews where you talk about the music industry, and you also do book reviews and all other kinds of good stuff. So let me start with this, Janae. Where are you from now? You're from Florida, right? That's where you're at right now?
Well, that's where I'm at right now, but originally I'm actually from Long Island, New York.
Okay. And how long have you been in Florida?
Only a year and a half, I think it's been. It hasn't been that long. Before that, I was in Massachusetts.
Okay, so you're from like the cold parts of the country.
Oh, yes.
Are you glad to be in Florida?
Yeah. This was a very purposeful move.
I understand. Now, I'm from Ohio, okay?
Yeah.
And where I am from, Ohio gets a bad rap as being really, really cold, and we're not. If you're up by Cleveland, there's this thing called the lake effect. And those folks up there get a lot of snow. But typically, I'm farther south than that. We typically don't have those horrendous winters. But in all honesty, Arizona would be okay with me. I like dry and hot. Obviously, your work has really centered around music. Have you always been inclined to do music?
Yeah. I mean, in high school, I played the flute. Not well, but I did play.
Okay.
I was in chorus for a number of years. So, yeah, I mean, I've always done something in music, just not obviously professionally.
Did you always want to be a recording artist or something like that?
No, and I still don't.
Okay.
I consider myself a songwriter. I just so happen to do my own demos. That's not really a choice, but I do them. And so the goal is actually that somebody else would like to sing my songs. Okay.
Well, have you ever done voiceovers and things like that? Because you have a fantastic speaking voice.
Oh, thank you. I actually am pursuing a career in voiceover as well. And that pretty much started when I got into the world of internet radio a number of years ago.
Well, let's talk about that. Tune Talks. Well, do you want to talk about your history with that?
Well, Tune Talks, which it actually doesn't really exist anymore, but Tune Talks was something that I created. It was Tune Talks with Janae, and I created that when I started an internet radio show, and it was basically that I would play music that I love, and I would just tell people basically about the songs, whether it was who wrote them or the singer or some history around the time of the song. And I would play music from anywhere from the 50s to present day. So it was a nice mix of songs, and it always revolved around a theme. So the big theme, of course, is love, but specific kinds of love, whether it's heartbreak or, euphoria or whatever. But that was the premise of the show. It was a theme-based music show that talked about the songs.
Do you have a genre of music or a type of music that you really gravitate to?
Well, when I write, interestingly enough, it sort of comes out country, usually.
Okay.
I grew up on country. I grew up on rock and roll. I grew up on just about every kind of music. But I loved country. So they come out country. My producer is a rocker. So when we get together, we create this whole other thing that I don't even know what to call it, to tell you the truth. So,
well, that's good.
Yeah. It's actually very cool. It's very cool.
Okay. What were some of your, growing up, some of your favorite country artists?
Oh, gosh. Crystal Gayle, actually, was.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I loved Crystal Gayle. She was awesome.
Yeah, she was.
Gosh. Okay. Now I'm on the spot. There's so many, but
right.
I don't know why Crystal just keeps popping into my head, and that's as far as I can get. Who else?
Well, that's a good one. I'm not real fluent on country. I know like the classics, some of them would be like Johnny Cash. And I've always felt, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that country as a whole, when it comes to guitarists, we always, Jimi Hendrix, Eddie Van Halen, all those kind of people come to mind. But I'll tell you, I believe that country musicians are very underrated.
I would go along with that.
Now, I mean, it seems like some of the best, solid musicians have come from country music. And I don't know that they get their due. They always kind of get made fun of as the twangy genre and things like that. But there were some really, really good musicians, Johnny Cash being one of them. And even the guy from Hee Haw, his name escapes me at the moment, but he was an excellent guitarist.
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. As a songwriter, have you always wanted to be one of those behind the scenes persons?
Always. And that's why I got into radio as well. I like to be behind the microphone, not in front of the camera, if you will. And I've always been kind of a shy person.
Really?
Yeah. I was that kid that sat in the back of the class and, prayed the teacher didn't call on me for an answer. I knew the answer. I just didn't want to say it.
Yeah. Interesting. Now you've gone with these, I'm going to say recorded programs about the music industry. And I believe that's with an attorney, correct?
That is correct. She is my attorney, actually, my music attorney. Her name is Cassandra Spangler.
Okay. And do you guys talk about some of the legalities of music and things of that nature? What's some of the topics on your talks about the recording industry?
Well, actually, we started off, what I wanted to do was to help other indie artists understand what they needed to do on the business side of music. It's a really hard industry to get into. There's so much going on. So I wanted to do that. And I thought, well, how cool would it be to bring in an attorney that can talk about the legal sides of all of the things that you want to do. And so that's how we decided to do it. So our first recording was the basics of all of the places you need to register your music. Because there's multiple places. It's not just one. The importance of copyright, things like that. And so again, this is stuff that people just don't seem to understand. They think the ones that actually get the importance of copyright think, I just copyright my song and I'm good.
Yeah.
But copywriting your song doesn't get you paid, believe it or not.
Oh, okay.
You have to register your song in different areas. You have to pick a PRO. So that would be a BMI or a CSAC. You want to register with Sound Exchange. You want to register, you want to get an ISRC code. That's basically like a barcode, except it's not. Your song also needs a barcode. Mm-hmm. If you want to get a distributor, you can go with either CD Baby or TuneCore or DistroKid. There's a lot of different things that need to happen before you just release your song.
Okay, a lot of the people that I'm friends with that are musicians, they use CD Baby quite a bit. And that seems to be a very popular one. So.
Yes, it is. It is. That's what I use, actually. And there's a difference between the way CD Baby works and the way TuneCore works and the way DistroKid works. And it really is what you're comfortable with. Do you want to share the money that you make on every song up front, or do you want it to be over time? So It's really a lot to research before you make these decisions. Although I would say that, I think I know Cassandra pretty well, and she'd say just pick one. Don't let that be your hang up. Just pick one.
Sure. Interesting you said about there's so many categories of things and so many things to do in the music industry now. I kind of wonder if it hasn't become so fragmented that it's actually hurt the industry. And I'll ask your opinion about this. Any song that you want to hear now pretty much is instantly available in the palm of your hand. A lot of people have music services, or you can download it or whatever. And the days of having to wait for your favorite song on the radio or on MTV, those days are long gone.
Yes.
And I kind of wonder, let's say, for example, Michael Jackson, when he first came on the scene. A lot of people who may not have been familiar with him would be exposed to his videos on MTV while they were waiting for whatever band that they were interested in. And that drew their attention to something. And I kind of wonder if somebody like Michael Jackson or one of those types of artists, even going back to the 60s, where you had so many bands like the Doors or, even the Beatles, if their fan base just had to be sort of courted on social media and drawn in, I don't know that they would have had the exposure. I don't know that you could have a big breakout artist like Michael Jackson that just totally dominated everything. I don't know if that is possible today.
I actually would say that there are a lot of breakout artists that started from social media. Believe it or not. I'm actually connected with a few people on Twitter that we've been connected from the beginning. we started off together, and I have seen them completely blown up.
Really?
Yeah. And the cool thing about that is, well, some of them continue to stay connected with those people that were there from the beginning, and others not so much, but it's really, really cool to see the people that, for instance, I'll give you a name, Luke Bryan. Oh. Luke Bryan and I have been connected on Twitter for a long time. And awesome. I want to say it was even before he got big and famous. He is huge, obviously. Yeah. We are still connected. Yeah.
So you feel that there is. Let me put it this way: a lot of people say the good thing about the internet is that everybody has access. The bad thing about the internet is that everybody has access.
Exactly.
There's so many voices out there, but you kind of feel that you actually have a better chance now than what you did, say, 25 years ago.
Well, I would say it's a different chance. I think that the masses, have a chance now, whereas before you had to be a part of a label. And if that label didn't pick you up, you had no shot. And I shouldn't even say that because, of course, there are people that still made it even though they didn't have a label. They got picked up by a label eventually because they made their own noise. But I do think that today you have a better shot and you don't need a label, which is really kind of interesting. Really interesting. Yeah. I mean, you just don't have to go to a label anymore. You just don't have to do it. And I think that is really, really, really cool because the history of labels is not so good in terms of, not paying their artists. They're making a ton of money, but the artist isn't necessarily. It looks good. All that stuff looked great. They looked so glamorous. They were living their best life, but really they weren't really making the money.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Well, even from, let's say, the early days of rock and roll, a lot of those recordings sound subpar by today's standards, but not for the reasons that a lot of people know. It's not just because the technology has gotten better, but let's say in the 50s and even part of the 60s, record executives did not take rock and roll seriously.
Right.
So the best recording engineers, the best rooms and everything got Sinatra and Nat King Cole and all these other people. If you were a rock and roll band, some of them were recorded as crudely as having them set up and pointing a microphone at the band. That's how crude some of those recordings were done. So I do believe that even through the 70s, there was a lot of executives that were out of touch in terms of the creative process and things like that. And now you can get more hands-on. Would you agree with that? You can actually produce your own stuff. Oh my gosh, absolutely. I mean, I'm not a one-woman operation because I do have a producer and obviously a lawyer and all that stuff. But ultimately, it all comes down to me, really. Yeah. I'm the one doing all the administrative stuff behind the scenes and all that good stuff, which, like I said, is not that easy. But you just have to be organized and stay current. Getting back to Twitter, you mentioned Twitter. You've been connected with some major folks on Twitter. How long have you've been on Twitter? Now, you've been on Twitter a while, correct? Yeah, since 2009. And I don't even know when it started. Wow. When did Twitter start? Do we know? I'm going to say 2007, right in there somewhere. Okay. I could be wrong, but somewhere around in there. So you were one of the relatively early adopters. Yeah. I think that was probably the second. Well, maybe I did something else too. Who knows? But the first was LinkedIn, I think. And then it was Twitter shortly thereafter. I've been on it a long time. Probably I got on it, I believe, a year later than you did. Okay. So we've both been on it every bit of 10 years. Back then, the landscape for Twitter was a little different. The way it behaved was a little different. It was. Yes. What made you decide to get on? That's a good question. I want to say that somebody just mentioned it. Okay. And said, try this Twitter thing. And I was like, okay, I'm willing to research anything. Doesn't mean I'm going to do it. And I probably just researched it and said, oh, that looks interesting. And then I jumped on. I mean, it was pretty much that simple. And over the years, I mean, I've taken a hiatus here and there where I'm off for like 3 months because I just get busy doing something else. But I've been pretty faithful to Twitter, like I said, and LinkedIn. Yeah, it's kind of been my social media home. I believe that LinkedIn, the last couple of years, has really come on strong for video. Yeah. And if you do videos and let's say in your case, you want to talk about the business of the music industry, something like that, I believe that is a good avenue to go. But when it comes to macro things that are happening in real time, trending and all that, Twitter is pretty hard to beat. Do you have a Twitter strategy? Do you incorporate any type of strategy in how you get followers and how you get attention? Honestly, I don't even pay attention to that. And I mean, I pay attention, but I don't focus on, oh my God, how many followers do I have? Yeah. I mean, I've been on for over 10 years. I think I have, what do I have? Maybe 1,500 followers. That's horrible for a lot of people. They'll say, that's terrible. You've been on so long, but my focus is not to gather followers, honestly. My focus is to get to know people. And if you have something that I like, I want to share it. I want to help people get out there, So that just has never been my focus to do the follower thing. Yeah, I would agree with that. When I notice people doing like let's follow for follow and all these other things, when you're following people just for the sake of following, you're really not interested in their content. Right. It's just a matter of driving up your numbers. And getting back to LinkedIn, even though you have a much smaller circle in LinkedIn, you have people who are very active in the business community. You have people that, are doing things to enrich the marketplace and things like that. So that's where you want to be, even though you're dealing with a much smaller number of people that are much more active. And that principle kind of applies to Twitter as well. If you have 1,000 people who are interactive and helping you promote yourself and working on projects together, that's what's important. Just 10,000 people just sitting there, just to have the number logged in really doesn't mean anything. Now, I would be willing to bet that you don't necessarily have a personality that you try to project on Twitter. I often ask people if their Twitter persona kind of fits who they are. But I have a feeling you are who you are.
Well, I take that as a compliment. Yeah, I am. I actually, this is me. I think the difference between me not on Twitter and me on Twitter is I might have a little quicker temper not on Twitter.
Really? Uh-oh. Now I'm nervous now.
That's right. And I think that I've toned down my sarcasm a little bit on Twitter. I can be super sarcastic. Really sarcastic. Oh, yeah.
Okay. So you're being nice to me then. So for some reason.
Yeah. Well, I'm nice to nice people. That's what I do.
Oh, okay. Which kind of leads me into this next question. We talked about the Twitter landscape being different. I'm not going to get into politics, but there's absolutely no question. If you've been on Twitter longer than 5 years or upwards of 10, there's no way that you could have not noticed that something changed in 2016 with the election. Have you experienced a lot of negativity? Have you had trolls? Has the landscape changed? Or what would be your description of that?
Well, I think that I don't try to get into fights.
Yeah,
that's one thing. I see a lot of the negativity, and believe me, I do look. So there might be some comment, and then I look at the comments that people are making, and and then I have to walk away because I get really, like I said, that anger builds. You may not see the tweet, but in my head or coming out of my mouth, it's a whole other story. But I don't engage. I'll read them and just move on. And so I think that's how I kind of stay out of that fight. It's definitely changed. I mean, politics aside, the biggest change was we now have more than 120 characters to
oh, yeah, that's true.
Communicate with. Remember back when it was 120 and that was the end of that? Yeah. That was hard.
Yeah, it was hard. Was that a good move on Twitter's part? Has it helped or has it hurt?
See, and I think this is where I'm headed here. I feel like maybe because we have the ability to use more characters, people are saying things they maybe wouldn't say.
Oh, interesting.
Have said in the past, because now they have the room. You can write a book on Twitter, for crying out loud. I've seen them. So
yes.
So I think that might have actually tipped the scales to the negative. Sorry, I know everybody's probably hating on me now because they're like, no, don't take away our characters. But no, I think that was not maybe such a good move, actually.
That's an interesting point because I don't remember exactly when that happened, but that was probably around the general time frame as when politics exploded on Twitter. Right. And that's an interesting point. I haven't had that brought up before, so that's kind of interesting. What is your favorite aspect of Twitter? I mean, it's got some good, we both would agree it's got some good aspects to it. What would you say is one of the things you really like?
Well, I've found a lot of really cool talent on Twitter, actually.
Yeah.
Going back to the music thing. Another person that I have been connected with since really the beginning, I want to say she was one of my very first connections, and now I'm going to blank on her name. This is terrible. Katie. What is Katie's last name? Oh, God. I have her CD. I bought her CD. Yeah, it'll come to me eventually. But in any case, we've been connected from the beginning. And here's another person that blew up over time. She's touring with Smashing Pumpkins.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and has been for the last, I think that's happened about a year or so ago that she hooked up with them. But yeah, that's another person. So I think finding people, talented people like her, and a number of people. Gosh, I love the band Y, which is out of Canada.
Interesting. I'm not sure I'm familiar with them, to be honest with you.
I'd say check them out. They're awesome. Okay. They're awesome. I think, interestingly enough, I get a lot of my current events from Twitter.
Yeah. Well, that was good. I was going to say trending. There's for real time events. It's hard to beat. Yeah.
It's true. It's absolutely true. I open it up and I'll yell to my husband, "Hey, did you know this happened?" And he's like, "No, when?" I'm like, "I don't know, but it's on Twitter." So,
yeah.
The other thing is I love like the jokes. I love to laugh. So there are some really funny jokes on Twitter. There are a lot of heartwarming stories. That part of it, I love. I love the community too. I mean, if you put something out and somebody actually responds to it and you have a little conversation via Twitter, I think that's great.
Absolutely.
Met some seriously wonderful people on Twitter that I have yet to meet in real life, but I'm going to. Walter Hargrave. He runs the Indie Music Bus. We've been connected for years and years. Well, he lives in Florida. He's going to be going to Okeechobee Fest, and we're going to go too, just because I want to meet Walter.
Okay. That's awesome. I don't know that I'm trying to. I don't know if I've had some. I've met a few in Ohio.
Okay.
I don't know that I've met somebody out of state. And interestingly, one of the accounts that I have for doing production work, I got connected to on Twitter. I've been doing work for her for almost 10 years, and I still to this day have never met her. Wow. So, yeah, it's amazing how the world works in that regard now. If you were going to give advice, if somebody came, let's say and before I let you go, I want to talk about your books and the interviews you do with authors and stuff. And that kind of leads me into this because when you do marketing for authors now, one of the things that they almost always tell you is to get a Twitter account started. Because anything involving music, which is, here again with downloads now, it's not like you have to be at a record store. You can access that material anywhere in the world. And same with books now. You can either order a book on Amazon or obviously there's the electronic versions. So it's so easy when it comes to content to make that available. And Twitter has an instant reach. It really does. What would be your advice, let's say, to somebody who has something going on? They have a new album coming out or they have a new book coming out, and you tell them, you know what, you really should get involved with the writing community on Twitter. So start a Twitter account. What would be your best advice to have a good experience?
Oh, to have a good experience. Well, I think it's changed for me, going back to your original thing of how it's changed.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to, if somebody wanted to connect with me, I would connect with them. No big deal. I think now, actually, I do a little more vetting. So I won't just follow people because they're following me.
Okay.
Yeah. Because what I find happens is I follow them back, and the next thing you know, I get a DM. Hey, how you doing, buddy? Well, now wait. First of all, not your buddy, or they start immediately pitching something.
Yes, immediately.
Immediately. It's like, wow, that barely went through and I'm already getting a pitch. So I think I would say, don't be afraid to not follow people back. Honestly, I know that sounds kind of counterproductive if you're trying to build a business.
No, I get you. Yeah.
But to me, you want to surround yourself with the people that are your people, the people that you want to surround yourself, not people that potentially are going to bring you down in some way.
Yeah.
I would say don't be afraid to unfollow, honestly. If you've been following somebody and suddenly they start saying things, because I found those accounts as well.
Really?
They'll have these wonderful sayings and quotes, and then all of a sudden 2 weeks later, it's things that I go, oh my gosh, I can't believe they just posted that.
Yeah.
But it was kind of like a bait and switch situation. So I found that as well. So I'd say don't be afraid to unfollow. Also, I think this is probably maybe the most important. Remember that your tweets are public.
Yeah, that's true. And forever.
And forever. Everybody makes mistakes. I've made mistakes. Absolutely. But some of the things that I've seen people post on Twitter, I'm just sort of cringing and going, oh, I don't know if they want that to be up there. So, I guess think before you vent.
Yeah. Well, what I've noticed too is, and I understand there's, advocacy for certain health conditions and things like that. But it does seem like there was a time, I'm old enough to remember, when your medical records, for example, were something that you were very private. Right. And now it seems people put them right in their bio. They have a whole list of medical ailments, and put it right in there. And it seems like they share so much stuff that, 20 years ago, you wouldn't have dreamt of putting out there in such a forward way.
Yeah.
Is that just me or?
No, I think I 100% agree. I mean, there's overshare culture. And then going back to what you were saying about artists then versus artists now, people are so hungry for information about their favorite artist, their favorite actor, their favorite writer. And I get it. I used to read Teen Beat. I want to know everything. But that was controlled, right?
Yes.
Twitter and other social media platforms just don't seem to be controlled at all. And like I said, once you put it out there, it's out there. I just think that people need to really, really stop and think before they tweet.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's great advice. Some great insights here with you, Janae. Before we go towards the end of the interview, I do want to talk just a little bit about your book reviews. Is this something you've just started recently, or?
Yeah, I guess it started 6 to 8 months ago.
Okay,
and that started. Interestingly enough, Andy Rausch is a writer, and I was approached by somebody who was promoting his book. And that book at the time, he's written a million books, but this book was Bloody Sheets, which is a story about the KKK. A book I actually never would have picked up, to tell you the truth. But they approached me. They asked me if I would be willing to read it and review it. My policy around that is I don't like to put negative things out. So if I read the book and I don't really like it, I'm not going to review it. That's just the way it is. I read this book. It's like nothing I'd ever read before. It was a hard book to read. It wasn't over my head. It's just the concept was like, gosh, this is difficult. But I loved it. I loved Andy's writing style. So I agreed to do it. But then I thought, I want to take this a step further. And so the idea for doing an audio video book review where I just use the cover of the book and I always get permission and put it up on YouTube was born. I don't know where that idea came from. It just came. And then I was like, well, there's so many other books that I love, and other writers. So I started doing them too. Ty Allen Jackson, he's a children's book author, but he's also one of my friends from back in Massachusetts. We've been friends forever. I've done interviews with him before. I decided, let me do his books. Also, I wanted to do the interviews. I wanted to get back into interviewing again, something I used to do in the past. So I decided, you know what, let's do authors. Why not? I mean, I think Ty was the first author I had ever interviewed back. I don't even know how many years ago this was. Maybe it could have been 8 years ago. I don't remember now. And I just wanted to get back into it. And I decided, let's do it now. Let's do it now.
I've interviewed a lot of authors, and to me, the ones who are most interesting are the ones who tell personal stories. I just interviewed Concha Alborg here about a month or two ago, and she wrote a book about her mother's memoirs from the Spanish Civil War. And quite frankly, I did not know that much about the Spanish Civil War.
Okay.
And to hear her story, what happened in Spain during that time, and then her life as an immigrant coming to this country, there were a lot of things that touched on what's happening today. A lot of the things you hear about refugees and a lot of the other things. So it was an interesting parallel, and to hear it from somebody who actually experienced it was very interesting. And I find those kinds of personal journeys just absolutely fascinating.
Yes. So absolutely. And there's so many books and so many authors, and they're wonderful. And I just want them to get some exposure, I guess is my point.
Yeah. Well, Janae, I got to tell you, you are an amazing. I'm just enjoyed listening to you. You have this this great voice. You have this confidence in what you're doing, and you're obviously a creative person. You can feel the creativity and the passion for what you do. Where can people find out more about you now? What exactly is your Twitter screen name again?
It's Toon Talks. So just TUNE Talks, TALKS.
Okay. And do you have any other social media website or anything like that you want to mention before we go?
Well, I mean, people can find all of my work on YouTube under my name. And there's always LinkedIn as well if you want to connect there under Janae Giddens. I have a couple of websites. However, they are very much outdated and need to be revamped and all that good stuff. So, and there's nothing updated on there. So it doesn't even make sense to do that at all. And that's it, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Jenny, I wanted to, again, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it. I'll spare the audience the details, but we had a while getting this scheduled. We both had some things happen with scheduling and some other things. We finally got it together.
Yes.
And I'm so glad to have had you on the podcast. Once again, we have been talking to Janae Giddens, and she is on Twitter at Toon Talks. Do check her out. She has some great interviews and some things going on. Very worthwhile to hop on Twitter, say hello to Janae, tweet her, whatever, follow her. Thank you very much, Janae, for being on the program today.
Thank you for having me, Billy. I'm glad we finally got this to work.
Yes. Mission accomplished, right? It shouldn't have been that difficult. We had some technical, just let the audience know, we had some technical issues prior to getting this on. So we finally got it together, and I'm very happy. Now, if you want to follow me, for those of you who are listening, you can follow me very easily at Billy Dees. You can pretty much find me on all the social media platforms at Billy Dees. I really have not been that creative with any screen name, so real easy to find at Billy Dees. You can find the Billy Dees podcast on most of the major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, all those. Once again, I am Billy Dees. Thanks to Janae, and thanks to our audience for listening to our podcast today. Well, hello, everyone. I am Billy Dees from the self-titled Billy Dees podcast. You can find me on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and many more of the best podcast networks. Join me for my commentary and interviews. Follow me on Twitter, real easy to find, at Billy Dees. I am Billy Dees. I'd love to have you listen in.